Today's guest on Mindful Leaders is Dr. Armen Kherlopian, CEO and partner at Covenant Venture Capital and founding partner at BAJ Accelerator. Born and raised in New Jersey and New York to immigrant Armenian parents from Lebanon and Syria, Dr. Kherlopian studied biomedical engineering and biophysics at Columbia, Cornell, and Princeton Universities. As a scientist, researcher, angel investor, and advisor to the board of several prominent corporations, he is a coveted leader steering initiatives that leverage AI in various fields. In this episode, we discuss the relevance of AI, data sciences, innovations, and entrepreneurship. We also explore Dr. Kherlopian's historical and family legacies that have been pivotal in his successes and mission to push boundaries in tech and sciences and contribute to the betterment of our world. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Dr. Armen Kherlopian, welcome to Mindful Leaders.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor. You've had scientists, investors, business folks, civic leaders, and I'm delighted to be here, particularly for what it seems like the holiday special, given our date today.
Yeah, Christmas special, Christmas holiday. Very fitting to have you here. I think I'm trying to remember the first time I met you, and I think the first encounter was during a conference on Generation N hosted by Dean, during which you spoke not only about AI, not only about computer engineering, but you spoke about a topic that I hold dear to my heart, and that's storytelling. You talked and the connection of storytelling with data, with resilience and culture. And from that moment, I was hooked. I was hooked. So you wear numerous hats. You have so many different portfolios. For people who do not know who you are, how do you summarize what you do and, more importantly, why you do it?
In a summary, I work as an investor, scientist, as well as entrepreneur. And there's different components there. If we, for example, take the investing side, it could be done in a few different ways. One way people typically start is that of being an angel, which even in its phrasing and translation to different languages is quite new and in the beginning often a little shocking to folks. And to summarize with that type of investment activity, what it's really about is understanding risk and having boldness around opportunities. And so it's angel not in the context of someone being so nice, but it's someone fighting for something. And in this case, it's fighting to protect small companies that can change the face of nations.
You bring, I've spoken to you a couple of times, and you bring so much heart and soul and spirit to science. I'm fascinated to know how, in your journey from biomedical engineering and biophysics, you actually came and merged into the world of entrepreneurship, startups, and investment. Was there something that happened in your life? Was it an encounter with somebody that you were inspired by? Was it serendipitous? How did that happen?
I'd say there's a few things. One from my family upbringing, and two relating to a set of beliefs I have around innovation, leadership, and how that can have things like prosperity and safety attached to it. So yes, you highlighted my different academic training, and I have spent quite a few years in school. And even from my time in academia, I was always fascinated with this point around advocacy for innovation. There is different types of advocacy. There's advocacy for consumers, for patients. And what I've come to internalize is that innovation is hard and it requires being quite proactive, because that proactiveness can lead to success, stability, and new opportunities. So from my time in the lab, I found that a bit of diplomacy was also required in scientific circles, that the best ideas don't always win. They have to be presented well, they have to be positioned well, and they have to be resourced properly so the outcomes can be that much better.
You know, I think about innovation. When I think of innovation, I think about your time at Booz Allen Hamilton. It's like well over 10 years ago and more, but that's where you co-wrote, during that time you co-wrote the field guide for data science. Is that correct? And that document was regarded as the most impactful piece on thought leadership since the firm's over 100-year history. And I actually downloaded the document. I read it, the PDF document, and it's a very well concise and well explained document that states what data science is, the relevance and why it matters to organizations, and how to create data science teams. And knowing that how important data science is for organization and decision-making processes today, I realized, wow, at that time, you actually played an important role in establishing or being part at the forefront of a topic or a discipline that was not even, you know, taught in universities. There were no programs or degrees at that time, from what I remember. So that's pretty impressive and a great feat. Tell me another project that has been rewarding for you and that has made an impact on people.
That seminal work, it was an absolute pleasure to write with a set of colleagues. And we had observed years prior that the DARPA Autonomous Vehicle Challenge had inspired a set of data-driven approaches. What comes to mind is everything from driverless cars, but if we could treat and develop systems that could see what else could be done across healthcare, across finance, even across using things like satellite imagery for the prevention of mitigation of atrocities. So with colleagues, and as you noted, there were no formal programs in data science, so we emerged from various disciplines, astrophysics, biophysics, in my case, different colleagues coming from econometrics, and the discipline formed and is subsequently merged in with artificial intelligence around taking data-driven approaches, extending people's capabilities in machines to see, to hear, even to smell. So one example that comes to mind, which had reconnected me to Armenia, is with colleagues in a subsequent post. We did work for Sir Richard Branson's Formula E race car team. And Formula E, standing for electric racing, is a sibling, younger sibling, to that of the well-known Formula One. And in the same way we used algorithms across different industry, and an algorithm being nothing more that can be programmed into discrete steps, and now with machine learning as part of artificial intelligence, those algorithms can learn and adapt. We developed a way for the race team to adapt their racing strategy and style so we could get maximal performance from the vehicles. And so the impact of champions standing in the New York City Grand Prix, for example, is a testament that with algorithms, limited and more renewable resources, we could have outcomes that are better in this specific case around sustainability and reducing pollution.
I'm glad you illustrated this because something came to mind. I know that there's a great number of different type of public conversations around AI, AGI, and to be frank, I still have so many questions around this topic. I've spoken to different people, and I still have a hard time understanding it. And I think where I'm at right now is I have a great fear that the human species is probably going to be the less dominant species on this planet. And so the question comes, what is it to be human in a world where there are human-like things that are not human? How do we make sense of it all? You know, and why are we not having the tough conversations to help propel us or prepare us for the next wave?
It brings to mind an exchange I had with Garry Kasparov on the back end of one of his talks, and he comments, If you ask 10 AI experts a definition for AI, you will get 20 answers. So I'll provide one and then address the question as best as I can. So if we consider an artificial intelligence system as something that can help us make decisions, and indeed generating content is a sequence of decisions, you have machine learning under that, which is having algorithms that can adapt, specifically learn from data. And then you have different types of data corresponding to human senses and beyond, you know, our sense of sight in the case of computer vision, or our sense of hearing, sense of smell, or even things that exist in the animal kingdom, or data types that are not fully intuitive of us, like a network graph. These can be learned from. So if you have intelligent agents, or one day AGI, artificial general intelligence, well, what does this mean for humans? I'm quite optimistic in that this type of advanced technology will lead to hybrid teams. So you'll have AI systems that are quite capable, working with teams of scientists, researchers, civic leaders, to even combat rogue systems. So that's how I view this technology evolving. And I'm definitely excited about, you know, things in work that'll become automated. Like, you know, what comes to mind is the old switchboards in every building for the telecom. We have modern day equivalents of that. I'd say like data entry, like everyone's job from almost 100% to at least a material fraction is on data entry. So will that be needed in the near future? Now, in terms of what's happening on a global scale, there is debates around regulation, and should, you know, AI research be curtailed? I'm of the point of view of researchers that the research should advance, and this way we could also research increasingly sophisticated safeguards.
I don't know if it helps me reduce my fear, but I see the point. I know that there are pluses and there are advantages to it. It's just we don't have that kind of conversation, that kind of mutual dialogue to help even the people who are not scientists and not in sciences in terms of AI or computer engineering understand the benefits and not necessarily fear that automation will reduce our jobs, or, you know, we'll be replaced by robots. That's the thing, is that there's that element is missing, I find. But when you talk about researchers and scientists, I can't help but think about when I was growing up, teachers, parents, schools, actually colleagues and staff would encourage us to pursue specific dreams, you know, whether it's, you know, being an architect, being a veterinarian, a teacher, or an astronaut. Newer generations, I find that their aspirations are so different. And we kind of spoke about this a little bit. You know, they have this dream of being a YouTuber or a social media influencer. As a professor, how do you teach, or how do you help people understand the quality and the importance of dreams?
Yeah, it's been quite a transition across the generations in terms of what is the idealized profession, you know, from astronaut to YouTuber. And so there's the age-old advice, you know, follow your dreams. I would say in current form, when, you know, someone asks me to serve as their mentor, a university context when I guest lecture, or even with our portfolio founders as they're looking to inspire their teams and their markets, we ascribe to, as a firm and myself personally, that folks should follow their effort. So if the effort is around creation, well, is the best way to make some content on advertising revenue, or to build a product that does something meaningful for the world. You know, one area that jumps to mind is the field of robotics. Right now, it is up for grabs what will be the robotics centers for the world. And robotics are essentially an instantiation or an embodiment of AI. And so what should these things be doing? I mean, some examples that jump to mind is, well, if there's a situation where it's not safe for a human to go, such as an industrial facility, where there's extreme pressures or temperatures, or areas around our infrastructures or roadways, those are the products that could be built. So I tend to do best effort to provide these types of examples.
And what about apathy? I tend to think that there is an increase of apathy or a sense of apathy in people, given that we have visibility and experiences to a wider range of different types of crisis, trauma, war, fear, rage, loneliness even, more loneliness. So I'm assuming that the default is to become apathetic because you asked the question, what's the point of life? And we're not having that kind of conversation as well on, what makes our lives meaningful. So my question to you is, what is missing? If you believe that that's the case, what is missing and what do we need to make our lives meaningful?
One thing that immediately jumps to mind is a cultural lens. So if we consider over time, priorities and norms for communication, what I've been seeing in the university context, folks trying to build startups, is there's been a global expansion of individualism. And that is intriguing. So some parts of it, in terms of false positive, false negative, some of it can be apathy, some of it can be overload, some could just be increasingly individualistic view of the world. And so whether someone takes that as a default priority, focusing on an individual's view, oh, they did that, is that good for society, the world, or is it just good for them? What I intend to encourage and what I believe is, even if you hold that individual view, that you try to make that person stronger. This idea that if you can instill in your work and your life, strengthening people around you, that'll lead to networks in which you operate, in which you live, that are that much more strong and resilient. And I find that network building to be quite satisfying and something I encourage folks to do.
When I think of network, I think of family. And I'm thinking about you growing up, and having this intuitive sense that you would develop a career that would, push the boundaries and reach the edge of knowledge and really make an impact on people's lives at a large scale, because that's what you felt and you sensed that growing up. More importantly, you always also grew up with the sense of having a competitive spirit. From what I remember, you mentioned that you had done so many different sports, from swimming to soccer. You were competing in pentathlons. You even were a saxophone player. I mean, I can't imagine a child having any idle moment because you were busy, and that helped you gain your own strengths. And I think I would say it's thanks to your parents who encouraged this. And now my question comes is, who are these people? Who's Avo? Who's Ruby? And what kind of a vital role did they play in the upbringing and the development of Armen?
Yeah, my parents came over to the US during the Lebanese Civil War, from the Armenian community in Beirut. And my father specifically was raised in Homs, Syria. And one thing I learned from their immigration journey is the importance of movement. And my father, when he came to the US, he established a trading company under the Palmyra brand, which established a network, not unlike the old Julfa Armenian networks of centuries ago. My mother, she represented Lebanon in the fantastic sport of ping pong.
Table tennis.
Yes, yes. Yes, one of my favorite films is Balls of Fury. It is a ping pong tournament done in the Jean-Claude Van Damme blood sport scenario of, to the death ping pong. And, from her tournaments in the former Yugoslavia, in China, I always had this sense of motion as a child growing up, that it's important to push boundaries, to do best to set records, to inspire others, and to establish connections across a network. And even a generation before that, with my grandparents from Aintab and Marash, survivors of the Armenian genocide, there was also that sentiment of movement. Just 2 generations later with my brother, we were born in the very exotic land of New Jersey. And then at age 5, we moved to New York State. And I remember as a child, as children, we would discuss, okay, like when's the next move? We were raised with stories as children, as young adults, of the age of empires, of conflict. And so in our upbringing, we had that motion because we had at least intuitively the sense not to take anything for granted.
Yeah, and coming back to your this idea of crossing borders, Yervant and Anna were your paternal grandparents, and Yervant being born in 1897, I think it was.
Yeah,
am I correct?
We've checked the records before 1890.
Okay, before 1890. My goodness. And so this man, your father's father, he's in medical college during the Ottoman Empire, and when I think it was the Kantara line that broke near the Suez Canal, that basically when he joined the Allies and moved to Jerusalem, so there's Aintab, then Jerusalem, and then from there landed in Syria. So he really did push boundaries, and I think that gives him a strength of versatility. And I can't help but see Yervant in you, because there are so many similarities in that kind of movement, versatility, being curious. How do you think that your grandfather or any of your grandparents have impacted you, because you've never met them? How have they impacted you, and why is it important for us to be historically conscious?
Yeah, the impact and the stories have been tremendous. And in terms of my grandfather's example, we're talking about empires that don't exist anymore. And so he himself was drafted into the military when the line broke at the Suez Canal. He was able to take some of his staff, and they were able to then work for the Allies in Jerusalem after the Battle of Jerusalem. And so hearing these examples of the borders of nations, the borders of empires, brought to mind, even as a young child, the importance of diplomacy. Because you do not know when things will shift around you in a greater context that have, in many ways, could have nothing to do with you. But to protect a family, to protect the people, to advocate for a future that you want, requires that diplomatic acumen. And so these are some of the things I took away, even an interest in health and health technology. In terms of my mother's side, my grandfather, they're a cobbler, and I would be told as a child these stories from the shop, the humor, the sense of humanity that's really important, particularly because when you meet someone, you don't know what they're struggling with or what challenges they have. And we can read in the history books some of these times that required legendary acts of heroism, striking sacrifices, unimaginable turmoil. And I feel very fortunate that, yes, I do like reading textbooks, but I have the stories directly in my family. But
you also, I have to be thankful to you, because I was able to go back into history books myself and read some of our historian Sebu Arslanyan's books, because we spoke a little bit about how Armenians have in their DNA to survive and to thrive. And there was an analogy that you made about how Armenians today are very similar to Armenians in the 1400s, when there were clashes in the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire, basically that forced Armenians to migrate, and they migrated to different parts of the world, like you mentioned. And, you know, from Italy to Acapulco, to Portugal, Singapore, China, India, Holland, you know, and they were well-known, not just merchants, but printers, and they were fluent in multiple languages, and because of that, they were able to integrate in those parts of the world. And so now I think, you know, they were across, as he uses the term, cross borders or border crossing, and because of that, that sense of that versatility that they have, and being able to adapt to different situations is pretty much like how Armenians are today in the diaspora. How do you see the future of Armenians today? You know, thinking about the analogy that we make from today and the past, yeah, but what about the future? How do you see the future of Armenians today?
Yeah, I believe this brings the important point around the diaspora networks. There's a set of countries, really a handful, that have a high disproportion of its people living around the world. Ireland comes to mind, there's Lebanon, there's the diaspora of the Jewish people. Estonia, from a tech innovation, is interesting in terms of the distribution of its population in country and abroad, and also Armenia. And that Julfa network is a fascinating part of history. And I would say it relates in present day to where the current center is. So 1,000 years ago, specifically 1080, there was the center of the Kilikia Kingdom or Cilicia Kingdom, in the northeast of the Mediterranean. After 300 years, that kingdom was dismantled. And in 1470, Armenians from Julfa made their way to Venice. Mm. And I could imagine when they came back and they told the city, stories of the city on the water and what it took in terms of advances of sailing ship technology, conversing across different borders, understanding different languages, learning different languages, that you had essentially a people sustained by not a nation, but a network. And that network, as you mentioned, spanned the globe. There's instances where the British would fly the Armenian Julfa flag so they could land in Spanish-controlled Manila. And I believe, you know, in present day, in the context of an Armenian nation post the Soviet Empire, you now have had a handoff from a kingdom to a network, and now a nation with a new emerging network, and one that can make a difference for the world around innovation. And so the vehicle is not a sailing ship with precious goods, it's a startup. The founders are captains of these ships, they're backed by investor merchants, and there's interesting analogs even around the contracts. So for example, there would be the Commenda contract, which was an agreement between the merchants, and draws very similarly to aspects of present day around the SAFE contract, a simple agreement for future equity. And so as we started, this idea of angel investing or investing in startups is new for many people. I believe there'll be certain networks around the world. Armenian is a great example that will excel and make a difference for the world engaging in this type of activity. And in the same way, there were only a few folks that had made it to Venice in that late 15th century. I believe right now we're at a similar point in time where engaging in this type of activity by supporting the companies, them generating tax revenue, the possibility around technology diplomacy is a really special thing to be a part of.
This is you're referring to the BAJ Accelerator, is that correct?
It's been a great pleasure to have co-founded a startup accelerator. You know, we've seen the journey of over 100 founding teams, 124 as of today, from 20 plus countries. And that, and with my current activity and leadership with Covenant Venture Capital, we support these founders who are making a difference. And they range. For example, it was a pleasure of ours to participate in the investment with Gecko Robotics, which quite literally has a robot with magnetized wheels that's able to not do human imaging, but infrastructure imaging. So think this robot climbing in high pressure, high heat areas of power plants, in terms of depots for petroleum and other materials, as well as ships at the ocean to ensure their safety, to get them out of dry dock faster. Another robotics example is there's Moxie, the robot Biomedical, where we have co-invested with firms such as the Amazon Alexa Fund, Intel Capital, even the Prince of Liechtenstein's fund. And so this robot is an AI tutor and can interact with folks in the home. And in many ways, these technologies are quite striking. They also enable us to make advances. You know, one of the scientific advisory posts I serve on is a NASA-funded institute, and you know, with Mars being the only planet we know of with robot inhabitants, there's whole new industries there on how to analyze data, how to have interactions with such systems, how to build such systems. And I'm quite optimistic about the rise of such industries.
Mm. Yes, but I'm hoping that the startups that you invest also, you understand the intention that they have behind it, right? I'm assuming there's a thorough selection process, obviously. There's hoşçaka. But you know, it's one thing to have a product or a service that is developed that is unique and important for people, but also the intention of the actual founders of the startup or the developers. I'm assuming that's what you look at as well.
Yeah, to invest requires at least three things. One is deal flow, as in spotting of opportunities, learning of founder teams. Two, as you're alluding to, you need ability to do diligence. So this involves very critically the motivations and intentions of the founders. And then lastly, how to add value to the ventures. So we are quite deliberate in terms of who we back.
Thank you for that. Now I'm going to ask one last question. And that's probably something that is also important for me related to leadership. Since the Artsakh war in 2020, and in fact, not just since the 2020 war, even for years and centuries before that, Armenians have been trying to heal different types of wounds and traumas. What type of leadership is required to help a nation heal its wounds, in your opinion?
What comes to mind is my biomedical training, in that healing itself is a very active process. If we consider physiology, you need nutrition, you need resource, you need to have safety so the body, and rest so the body can prioritize. And I view leadership around this healing process in a very similar way. Strength via a network, via economic output, via collaboration across individuals, and making a difference for a world is definitely a few good steps in the right direction.
Do you see that happening?
I do.
Okay, good. You know, Armen, I had the chance to get to know you a little bit more when we met earlier before this conversation. And I have to say, I was so impressed for a person who's so young, who's been able to accomplish so many things. Like I said, I do see Edvant in you, I see Ruby and Avo in you, and your other grandparents as well. You are you're a trailblazer. You don't stop. You are constantly on the move to really support, not just to support the success or the achievement of good things in life, in people's lives, and really making a good impact. But I see the role that you play in Armenia and how there are no restrictions of the efforts that you put to really improve the IT sector, the science and technology sector. And I'm only looking forward to seeing what the next 10 years will provide and what you'll be presenting to us, because I know it's just going to be an incredible breakthrough. So thank you so much for being here with me, Armen. It's been an incredible pleasure.
Thank you so much.